Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. Minister, we're always being told that Ireland is a great little country to do business in, but there probably is a perception that the focus is overwhelmingly on attracting foreign multinationals rather than nurturing sustainable homegrown industry. I think economic watchdogs like the Nevin Institute would warn that we need to be careful about an over-reliance on FDI. So the question really is just about how the hundreds of millions of state funding is divided and was divided over the years of this government's office between foreign and indigenous companies.
Don't wish to be evasive, but the question you asked was in relation to startups, and the statistics that have been provided for me relate to startups, which are, specific. And I mean, in general terms, the vast majority of startups are Irish. EI support about 185 startups. Only 10 of those would be sponsored by non-Irish individuals. So the run of money, running from 17 million in 2011 up to 29.5 million in 2014, the vast majority of that has gone to Irish-owned companies. IDA doesn't support startups in that sense, and similarly with the local enterprise offices, they have about 18.5 million. I'd say about 60% of that is on startups, and again, very, very few of those would be international. But on your wider question, over 2/3 of the budget of the department would be spent on Irish as opposed to overseas companies, and indeed, Irish companies account for the vast majority of the jobs growth. I mean, IDA was 7.5 net jobs, 1,000, Enterprise Ireland 8,500 net, and local enterprise office 4,000 net. So whatever that, 12,500 versus 7.5 on the export-oriented side. So we are substantially, most of our budget goes towards Irish-owned companies. Most of the job creation is on Irish-owned. But obviously, the foreign-owned are a very important part of the mix, and we seek to have a balanced expansion. But I think there is a fair devotion of resources to most, and the investment in Irish companies is on a much broader range: support for capability, for lean processing, for research and development, for innovation, for management development, for access to finance. A much broader suite of policy supports are available to Irish-owned companies.
Thank you. Deputy Clare Daly.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose this is really part of a broader discussion that needs to be had in terms of state supports which come in many forms. I appreciate the Minister's point about my question. I think I had two questions that were split in half, and I appreciate the points in relation to startups. I also hear what he's saying in terms of over 2/3 of his budget going to Irish companies, but I think that's only part of the issue. And we have to see, I suppose, business supports as being a lot more than just grant aids. And I think we do need an analysis. I mean, if you look at the role of large multinational companies which come to Ireland, it's not just because they get state aid. A lot of it has to do with our low corporation tax, our low PRSI rates, and as Michael Taft said, for the role that Ireland plays in global tax avoidance. I wonder, has the Minister seen the report done in Britain, featured in The Guardian last week, about this concept of corporate welfare, where big business is essentially getting massive handouts at the expense of the taxpayer? In a British sense, it was £93 billion, equating to over £3,500 per household. Why can't we do similar analysis here in Ireland to see the cost that's been borne by Irish families for this state subsidy to big business?
Come on, Minister.
Well, as the Deputy will know, like under the EU's regional guidelines, there's huge restrictions now on state aid that can be given to large companies, and by and large, there's not substantial state aid. Now, they can be supported in areas like research and development or training, but the era of large grants is over. I don't think the Deputy is right either that the predominant magnet of Ireland is around tax. The predominant magnet of Ireland is around talent and the I suppose clusters that we've developed in key areas. They have become the dominant attraction, and I suppose the corollary of that is that we need to continue to develop those talent areas. There's very strong demand for skills in areas of science, engineering, mathematics, and they're really important. In terms of support to Irish companies. They aren't grant aid in the talk you're talking about, what is the corporate handouts. That's not the approach that has been taken. I mean, Enterprise Ireland has very strict criteria. A lot of the money is competitive, or it's for leadership for growth, for companies to provide better leadership within
Thank you, Minister.
or to look at their processes and improve processes. It's very much focused on specific targets set by the business to grow their export and employment base. So it's not just dishing out corporate charity.
The point that I'm trying to make here is that the concept, and it's deemed to be one of corporate welfare, that's not just about direct aid, which, as you say, has been restricted somewhat over the past years, but it's really about subsidies and tax breaks. And would you not agree, Minister, that there's no centralised record in Ireland of exactly how much taxpayers' money is being diverted to foreign multinationals through various arms of the state in this way, and therefore the true cost to the taxpayer remains one of really the best kept secrets that we've had? And, you know, should we not be trying to find out that information? As I said, in a British context, the analysis has revealed the equivalent of £3,500 per household. I would imagine in an Irish context the amount of that transfer is far greater, and it's a bit like what TASC have said. What we really see here is that the fact that we have the concentration of income in fewer hands is giving wealthy people more power to lobby for tax cuts that will disproportionately affect them. And it is the case that therefore Ireland is one of the most unequal countries in Europe, and that this issue of corporate welfare is part of that, and that we would benefit from a greater analysis of
Minister.
it.
I think the Deputy really is letting ideology run away with her here. I mean, the total sum that my department disburses is 500 million. I mean, that's compared to a welfare budget of 20 billion, a health education budget of 8 billion, and a health budget of 13 billion. I mean, we are not engaged in substantial corporate welfare in any sense of the word. Any of the money that we disperse is very tightly accounted for. It's based on criteria, namely the capacity of those companies to grow and to deliver results. Very often it's linked to their delivery of the results, so that if there's support, it's connected. But it's all focused on commitments made by the companies, which are closely monitored by development advisors of the company. So, this is a strategy to support export-led recovery, and the evidence is there to deliver it. Irish-owned companies have had double-digit export growth in each of the last 4 years. We have, succeeded in attracting very substantial and ambitious companies to use Ireland as their base to grow in Europe. They believe we have a good business environment from which they can grow, and that's the nature of our policy. And I think it can be, any objective assessment of our policy would say that it is successful, it's focused, it's transparent, and it's accountable.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy John Brown has the next question.